Let's get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Vineetha Kartha. I am the Colorado River Programs Manager at the Central Arizona Project. Thank you all for being here. We do know this panel is standing between you and a glass of beer or wine. But trust me, this is the greatest panel that we have ever put together at CRWUA. So it's going to be just sweeter when you go to the bar. Thank you. So, people come to CRWUA because oftentimes there are a lot of solutions that we find at CRWUA. But CRWUA is also an important place to kind of understand the perspectives of other sectors, other people. And agriculture has been in the news for so long and so often. I therefore think this is really important for us to have this conversation today. Agriculture in the Colorado River Basin does form somewhat of a large user group, but we have to remember, in our Colorado River Basin states, agriculture also forms a very strong economic foundation. Based on 2015 numbers, UMA agriculture was $3.5 billion of the state's economy. It's a huge deal. Not only that, not only is agriculture a strong economic foundation, agriculture also forms a very important part of food security for North America. Did you know 2,500 trucks leave Yuma every day carrying leafy vegetables for the entire North America? It's really, really important. For CAP, it's very close when our agriculture does not get water supply. In the Pinal area in Central Arizona, farmers have not received Colorado River supplies over the last 3 years. It is affecting families. It is affecting economy. It is affecting food security. It's a really, really important issue. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and start introducing our panel. We have, as you can see, we have a large, and on the map, we can see that the panel is very diverse. We come from all across the Colorado River Basin. We have folks from Wyoming, Colorado, Arizona, Mexico, and across cultural perspectives as well. My first panelist that I'm going to introduce is Mike Vickrey. Mike is a fifth-generation cattle rancher from Sublette County, Wyoming. He attended the University of Wyoming and graduated with a bachelor's degree in animal science. He currently serves as the president of the Green River Valley Cattlemen's Association. His passions include working with young people and following the motto, "The future belongs to those who show up." Please join me in welcoming Mike Vickrey.
Thank you, Vineetha. As Vineetha said, I'm Mike Vickrey. I live in the upper basin, if you will. Let's see if I can run this machine. So how do we go backwards? So where our water begins, if you see that bend in the Green River at the very top, that's where I call home. I'm a fifth-generation rancher. We raise cattle in some of the best summer country there is. But to make it sustainable in the late 1800s, ranchers took to developing irrigation. In the beginning, mostly by horse, then later by more advanced means. With this irrigation, they were able to produce harvestable feeds to winter livestock. However, what we can grow is very limited, mostly just grass hay. People here want to be ranchers. They don't want to farm. They found by moving that water across vast plains of the high desert, they could grow hay. What has decades and decades of this type of water use done in our area? It has created a sustainable environment to raise livestock, food for the world, and frankly, food for CRWUA today, thanks for the lunch, in an otherwise tough environment made up of 80% federal ground. Agriculture, in particular animal agriculture, is the backbone of every community in my area. It is the stability of the Wyoming way of life. Many of our ranches still belong to families that homesteaded them. My organization, the Green River Valley Cattlemen, has recognized 40 centennial ranches in the past 15 years. Without the ability to irrigate efficiently and cheaply, those ranches would be sold for subdivision and ranchettes. But we're here to talk about the innovations and challenges of our water resources in the river system. I would argue that the greatest innovation was done 130 years ago in our country, when our forefathers were able to create a landscape that would support their livestock year-round. By coincidence, I believe, they created an environment that became home to some of the best wildlife habitat in the world. Streams that once dried up midsummer, according to my great-grandfather, now are able to withstand drought and continue to run year-round. In turn, the fishing and attached tourism that goes with blue ribbon fisheries has become a boon to the economic base of our small towns. Over 175,000 acres in the Upper Green are under irrigation, mostly by flood. As that ground is filled up like a giant sponge each year, we create a huge lake beneath the surface. That lake had little cost to build, little to maintain, and no permitting process by the federal government. Imagine that today. It's stored in a cool, dark environment with little loss to evaporation. It's joked in my family that you're not a good irrigator until you can make water run uphill. My granddad could do it. My dad can still do it. I've not yet perfected it. But in reality, water always flows downhill and works its way back to the river system to provide a continuous flow downstream. Studies have shown that 70% of the water applied to the ground returns to the river. A fair amount of that in later season flows. Wetstein studied in the late 80s on the New Fork drainage, which I call home. Other studies in different drainages with different soil types would suggest smaller but significant return flow of 25 to 50%. It's an interesting dichotomy in our area. We need snow, preferably a lot of it during the winter months, but not too early or we have to start feeding our livestock. We would like it to start melting off at lower elevations in March to get ready for calving in April and May, but not too fast, especially in the mountains, or we won't have enough water for the summer season. You see, our cup has to refill each year from only one source in the upper basin, and that's snow. How much it fills each year dictates what our irrigation season will look like. As you can see, our growing season's a little short. That picture was taken in April, late April of this year, and that's snow that we don't get to take advantage of. It's sitting on a hay meadow at our place. August 7th, I was haying at our upper ranch, and it snowed again. It's been said our growing season is 50 days. That's what we have. Due to our short growing season, we only have a small amount of time to use our cup of water, typically from late May to mid-July. If it's been a light year of snow, we may have to delay turn-on by a week or two. That is, if your ranch in Sublette County is fortunate enough to have water stored in a dam. Not exactly the Hoover Dam. These lakes are few and relatively small. If we had a really good winter, i.e. lots of snow, then some of that water is probably sent downstream to avoid risk of breaching that dam. Our water season is determined solely by snowfall and can vary greatly from year to year. We don't have the luxury of planning too far ahead. Usually we have an idea by February, but as late as March or April to make decisions for our upcoming summer. Now, if your ranch irrigates out of creeks or rivers with no dam, You're at the whim of Mother Nature. An early spring and quick melt-off force decisions on what to do with livestock not ready to go to summer pasture. Ranches depend on BLM ground in our area to move cattle off the meadows in the spring. While Mother Nature doesn't care about your timing, the BLM most certainly does. Low snowpack years combined with early runoff almost always equates to a shorter season than optimal for growing even grass hay in our area. Even really good snowpack years on a non-dam drainage sees us letting a lot of water go downstream early because normal spring work can't be finished in time to take advantage of those heavier flows of water early. Then, to top it off, on most of the smaller creek basins, which make up a majority of our hay ground, the creeks will exhaust irrigatable water mid-July to the 1st of August, which coincides with the first snowstorm or frost in our country. We can't look further upstream for more water. We are the upstream where I live. We fallow marginal ground on bad years and buy more hay if we didn't put up enough. We save for the next bad year. I don't tell you, and this is a slide I put in, that's the river that goes by our place, high and low, and it varies. It's crazy how much it varies up and down every year, and I don't think people understand that our water supply comes with that much variance every year. I don't tell you this to generate any sympathy. I love where I'm at. But to merely remind you that despite my father's sharp shovel, water does indeed flow downhill. And when you're at the very top of the basin, it does so based on the laws of Mother Nature. We can only hope to put it to beneficial use where we're from for the short amount of time it's there. We have created cheap storage, excellent riparian habitat for wildlife, livestock, and fish. We have enrolled in conservation programs if it fits the need of local ranchers. Some have even tried pivots in 3 or 4 inches of topsoil to see if that works. We have done this all while dealing with yearly changes by Mother Nature. Complete shutoffs on some ditches occur nearly every year in our area. We try to save for the future when we have a good year. We understand the problems because we're forced to deal with them every single year in our area, even though some of those snow pictures would make you wonder why. Going forward, remember to listen, and I'm talking to the people making decisions here today, and going forward, remember to listen to those people closest to the ground. They have more answers than you think. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, very much. You heard him talk about water supply and also how important it is for infrastructure. So next on our panel, we have Julie Bushell. She is the CEO of Ethos Connected, and she has over 25 years of expertise in the intersection of agriculture and technology. She has passionately shaped her career to bolster rural economic development with unwavering support for the agriculture. In 2019, Julie embarked on a bold journey. This transformation underscores Julie's commitment to addressing the most critical need within local communities. Her focus extends to safeguarding our food supply through agriculture, ensuring sustainable management of water resources, and nurturing the rural economies essential to our collective prosperity. Please join me in welcoming Julie Bushell.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I'm going to speak a little bit about what Ethos has done, particularly around water management. We focus on deploying and executing water and agricultural infrastructure. And how we do that, first and foremost, is connecting the acre, and specifically, thank you, down to the seed that's going in the ground. We do that through what we call LoRaWAN network, which stands for Long Range Wide Area Network. It is designed for the Internet of Things, very low cost, battery-powered sensors that serve as the extra eyes and ears that we can put at every diversion, every irrigation field, at every dam. Imagine you have ears there and eyes there 24/7, managing what we before now could not particularly measure. The value of real-time management through these sensors has been extraordinary through our several years of deployment. Aside from significant reductions in operational loss through real-time management, more precise water accounting, knowing what the aquifer levels are looking like due to these sensors being deployed, we're also capturing the intuition of water managers and irrigators that have been doing this for 40 and 50 years simply through collaborating and understanding the data that they see and the decisions that they're making, and then we pull that back and we apply it to our solution. And finally, I think the most important part of this is democratizing access to technology and data. In water management, all of you know, we are really victims of proprietary networks and proprietary solutions. History has shown us that managing water in silos has not been good for anyone. So what we focus on is giving access to every single stakeholder that's involved in the life cycle of water. So an example of that would be one sensor deployed at a diversion or one sensor deployed at a monitoring well in an aquifer. That same data, the same standard of data, is being shared with the state, water district, irrigation district, and the irrigator. And they're making decisions based on the same data, which is increasing collaboration, it's increasing the effectiveness of policy, and most importantly, it's allowed us to save over 19,000 acre-feet of water on a river that's only 21 miles long. So when we can look at democratizing data on a body of water that's as large as the Colorado River, just imagine what we can do when we're all working together with the same set of expectations and proof. And here's an example of what those sensors are doing today. We deploy these really at the field level to get a very granular water budget. Rain gauges, that is telling us precipitation data every 30 minutes. This data is given again to the irrigator. It tells them, do they need to irrigate? Also to the water district. How are they managing water based on precipitation? Groundwater level monitors. These sensors are deployed in monitoring wells and actually some active irrigation wells. And we're pulling out data every hour on the hour, telling us what the aquifer levels are doing and what irrigation pumping's effect is on the aquifer. Soil moisture probes are telling producers, no longer do we have to go out and kick the dirt, and if it's dry, we irrigate. We understand exactly what that plant needs based on the soil, based on the soil moisture at the root zone. And this is turned into 25 to 33% additional irrigation efficiencies just by seeing the data under the ground that we once couldn't see. Surface water level monitoring is giving us surface water levels on the head end, at diversions, at spills, so we understand how water is moving, and the real-time management of that, again, is significant in reducing operational loss. Pump monitors are telling us irrigation runtime, and then flow meter data, of course, is telling us every 30 minutes how much water is being pumped. And when you can deliver that data to everyone involved in the life cycle of water, you see fantastic results. And this is how simple it is. These are low-cost, battery-powered sensors that are reporting to that LoRaWAN network. This is what's key to that democratization of technology. Easy to deploy, low cost, and accessible. And I think from a technology standpoint, it is absolutely critical for a solution to provide the data that is what our customers, what water users, what irrigators want to see. If the data is too cumbersome, they cannot make proper decisions. So we work hand in hand with our customers to understand what they want to see, how they want to see it, so it doesn't take them 25 minutes to read through the data and be a data scientist. It takes them 1 second to look at where they need to make their decision and make it and move on with their day. Another view here, just a map view. This is what our customers are seeing in real time. What is the surface water level doing? And this could be 25, 30 miles from their office. In one instance, we've saved just 240 hours of drive time with a particular water district just because they have these sensors deployed all across the river system and could manage water from their office. That is substantial. They are no longer running the river with 7 days post-mortem data because they had to run it and take a visual measurement of a staff gauge. They're doing it in real time. This is what a groundwater monitor looks like. Again, real-time data of what the aquifer levels are. And just another view. And aside from water management, which is where we start, without securing our nation's water, we won't have agriculture. But once the technology and the connectivity is in place, it enables producers to adopt technology for their own operation. This could be cattle ear tags, it's soil moisture probes, it is weather sensors, it's you name it. But why is this so important? Is it obviously decreases the impact on natural resources, as we just heard. It improves quality of life for producers. You're taking 240 hours of drive time and allowing them to manage their operation more efficiently or just be home. It allows for immediate action, which is huge for sustainability. But most importantly, it's the data we need for value-added agriculture. It's what we just heard about. It's proving our practices in agriculture. It's proving what we've done for the last 100+ years. And it's the data that we need as those in agriculture to tell our story. I think it's incredibly important to educate the consumers on how well we do, what our practices have been over the years, and how we get to the healthy and nutritious food that they eat every day. And now is our time. We are seeing the highest demand of consumer engagement on where their food comes from. 63% of consumers want to know the source. 52% want to make sustainable choices. And that's why we're all here today. We need to deliver that data to the consumer to help them understand how we're doing in agriculture, the incredibly efficient and conservation measures we're taking when it comes to water so that we can continue to deliver the secure food that we've come to expect as a nation. And that's what we do. So we're taking that data, whether that's water efficiency data or irrigation efficiencies, we put that in blockchain and we deliver that downstream to a QR code. And I'm a firm believer that authentic data is going to lead us to trust. So we capture the data with authenticity backed by blockchain so we know that it's not been tampered with. We tell our story. You scan the QR code and it's going to pull up anything the producer wants to tell. But we're using those sensors in this case as third-party verifiers. In this instance, what you're seeing on the screen is a pork producer who wanted to tell his water story. They put in incredibly efficient measures, and they wanted to tell that downstream. And our hope as an industry, as a company, is that authenticity will drive trust with the consumer, it will drive value, and that value will drive consumer loyalty to understand American agriculture and how important it is for our own national security. And I'd like to leave us with this thought, and why I feel it's so important that we inform the consumer on what we're doing in agriculture and the strides we're making in water management. In the end, we will conserve only what we love, we will love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we are taught. By Baba Diom, 1968, a Senegalese conservationist. Thank you.
The unit of the Colorado State University that comprises the Agricultural Experimentation and the Office of Extension and Engagement. His research program focuses on innovative irrigation technologies, sustainable water resources management, alternative cropping systems, and crop consumptive use evaluation. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Perry Cabot.
We're good. Thank you very much, Vineetha, and I'm enjoying the conference. I've actually never been to CRWUA before, so this is really exciting for me. I think I met Bumblebee, Transformer, and Santa Claus in the same place the other day. Like any good academic, I have 12 different co-authors on this presentation, but I want to highlight the fact that I'm going to just hone in on innovations in agriculture, since this is the theme of our conference. I was located in Kremling on Vineetha's map, where I do have a research project, but the Agricultural Experiment Station where I'm based is in Fruita, Colorado, which is just on the far western side of the state, almost actually in Utah. And over the years, I've taken advice from my farmer advisory group and stakeholders that have led us to 3 different areas of innovation, which I'll briefly cover today: irrigation technology, consumptive use evaluation and monitoring, and alternative cropping systems. All of these have some degree or variation of innovation in them. Having mentioned innovations in irrigation, I'll segue quickly to say that we do have a space or lane that we're trying to be in to learn about how we can apply artificial intelligence to the work that we do, particularly in agricultural water management. And I'm always wanting to try to take a little bit deeper dive into AI, although I have to be careful not to go too deep on this issue. But the central point that we are focusing on in our work is this area right here in the middle, where Julie had a great segue for me, which is the amount of data that we can gather and produce is just voluminous these days. And then sometimes we get hung up on this decision-making step. What do we do with all that information? We get the technology is moving so fast that the space where AI really starts to help us is how do we transition from using this volume of data to making decisions in the field. So most people's, relatable, I guess, manifestation of AI is in agricultural robots, and universities around the country are using these tools everywhere for both gathering data and executing functions in the field. And so, we're not very different, except our robot's just a little bit bigger. The Colorado River District, actually through their funding partnership program, helped us support us in purchasing an advanced linear move irrigation system. And with that system, through the variable rate irrigation tools that it is equipped with, we have the goal of by 2025 at least being able to deploy a supervised AI algorithm that allows us to execute on an irrigation prescription. How this really starts, of course, and Julie laid the groundwork for soil moisture sensing, in-field data that farmers would need to gather. We'd need to do that at least a few times to kind of get the basis of what kind of field they're operating in. And then we get into this world of soil moisture sensing. That then takes us to a level where we can study in-field soil moisture sensing, but try to relate that to something a little bit more passive. And that takes us into where drones actually have a role to play, because those sensors, for our kind of work, can be prohibitively expensive for a lot of farmers, because we're putting sensors in so many places that there's almost no space for soil left when we're done. So we're trying to study how we can actually relate that in-field data to the passive gathering of data through drones. And that is then able to be translated into vegetative indices that give us a sense of how that crop is performing, healthy or unhealthy during the season. And those can be proxy measurements also for evapotranspiration. Ultimately, the goal is to take this sandwich of data and then relate it to something that we want to do, actuation, that step towards performing an activity that we want to be better. This is our continuous yield monitor of our field. We got a lot of work to do. This is not a very this is an extremely heterogeneous yield, and we'd like to see more yield there, and we'd like to see it smoother. So that's where the AI really comes in. You might be asking yourself, well, how do we actually do that? How do you act on all this data? Well, the Renke company we've been working with has a pretty phenomenal tool. It's their VRI tool. So what you're seeing here is our field with irrigation prescriptions for individual cells. And the point of this is not to say that a farmer would have to pluck every single cell in here and try to figure out how to do that. we want to let the AI help us figure out how to do this. This is impossible for any person to figure out how to develop a prescription based on the amount of information that we're going to give them. So that data sandwiching and relating it to that yield is the step we want to take to actually help us write that prescription so that farmers can make use of variable rate irrigation, or at the very least, shave 5-10% off of the need to divert the water, which is not nothing in our changing climate. I opened the door a little bit to talk about drones, and that takes us into consumptive use modeling and evaluation, which is an area that we also dabble in. And that has its basis in a fundamental question: how much consumptive use is really happening out there in the field? We've got projects, we're involved with OpenET, and I saw that DRI was here today, and that's a phenomenal product that we've used for some of our projects, particularly in the area of forage use. Farmers are wanting to know not just how much participating in these programs will cost me, but also, does this make a difference? We have a surprising amount of data that shows that farmers think well beyond the basic rational thing of a question around how much data, how much consumptive use, how many dollars I'm losing off of the participation in these programs. But the question becomes, how much consumptive use is really being conserved? Is it making it to where we say we want to make it? So that opens that door to using remote sensing. We are fortunate now that we're taking another step into agri-technology that is drone-based or UAV-based. What you're seeing here is some pretty interesting work that's comparing an almond orchard looked at from space, the 30-meter resolution, which is the one that's orange and green there off to the, versus the drone-based consumptive use modeling that we can do with the newer sensors that we can fly close to the field. Again, probably a little further beyond where we might expect farmers to be right now, but it's not out of reach. This is 10-centimeter resolution looking at evapotranspiration on almond trees. And this is exciting for me. And it opens up workforce development, because I tell you, I'm on the FFA board for my local high school, and these kids do not want to set siphon tubes. They want to fly drones. This opens up a great avenue for new generation of water professionals. The last thing I'll say is in the area of alternative cropping systems, there's a lot of innovations we're undertaking there. And I tend to do, I never do things if a farmer comes to me and says, that's just a really stupid idea. I really do try, like our first speaker said, listen to the farmers. And I start from this premise is that I might be able to study some great crop that might conserve all this water, but if a farmer doesn't really think they have a market for that, market takers are market makers. We tend to think that, if we just grow it, then somebody's going to come along and buy it. That's not exactly true. Farmers tend to be market takers. There's a market for them, and then they'll step in and grow that crop. So engagement with farmers has led us to the place where we're looking at some of these new varieties of forages. The Kernza intermediate wheatgrass, and I'm sure some folks here have heard about that. Sandfoin, which is sort of a forgotten forage. A lot of these have been around for a while. If you remember your Sand County Almanac, and Silphium is a sunflower cousin that has some strong possibilities as forages. The thing that gets me really excited about these is that you can get into a deep definition of what drought tolerance means, but we see in a lot of our traditional grassland irrigation reduction studies that our grasses take 2 to 3 years to recover. I'm really interested in seeing whether some of these perennial crops can take less time. So that opens the door for partial season cutoffs and other kinds of interim measures that would allow farmers to get back in the game a lot more quickly and not undertake or stand as much risk in participation. We have a lot of farmers that are interested in regenerative agriculture, and I'm really thankful that some of these folks are actually utilizing some of these principles in the SCPP that's been, I think the deadlines are next week, something like that. And so our participation with the Land Institute has, again, taken us into this exciting area of new alternative forages. They grow it as a grain, but in the interim, we think there's opportunities there. Now, I'm not saying there's going to be as much protein in some of these new new varieties as traditional grasses, but being able to have an economic, an enterprise budget that allows a participation in a irrigation reduction program where money will change hands, as well as being able to withstand drought through a grass that means you don't have to, cut up your whole field or deal with a bunch of negative outcomes. That marriage of those two economic sources is really exciting to me. And so I've probably never been more excited to see grass growing than when I saw the Kernza popping out of our field there at our research center. The last thing I'll say here is another area that I'm really excited about is our climates are they're crazy hot. And I mean, we know that. And in my area, we get up easily into 110 over the summer. So I started thinking about ways that we might marry what I call shoulder season crops, winter season crops. And we've been playing around with winter peas, winter legumes, what we call pulse crops. Not just because they have a health aspect to them, but because they also have forage value. What you're looking at here is a field of ours where we grew winter peas using only a shot of water in the fall, the previous season, and then no water in the spring. These satisfied their consumptive use demand from winter moisture. We cut those peas midsummer, leave a nice residue cover there, open the field up for participation in a water sharing program of some kind. We get a leguminous benefit, we get a regenerative ag benefit, and I'm thrilled to know that I've got a couple producers that are actually growing lentils as part of their SCPP application. So they're opening the door there. And then I always like to point out that these kinds of programs always work better when we trap the moisture into no-till. So the marriage of all these concepts really, I think, is innovative. And I'm fortunate to be working with farmers who are really trying these things. So it's really an exciting time in research.
Thank you, Dr. Cabot. So if you want to know anyone that's interested in gadgets and looking at new technology, our next speaker It's Josh Moore. I know him very dearly. He has partnered with us with CAP on a lot of innovative projects, especially with testing of agricultural efficiency. He's a general manager of the Crit Farms, a 33,000-plus acre farm that's owned and operated by the Colorado River Indian tribes near Parker, Arizona. A member of the tribe, Josh works with tribal leadership at Crit to steward the land and waters for the benefit of future generations of tribal members to live and farm along the banks of the Colorado River. With a bachelor's and a master's from the University of Arizona, Josh focuses on creating collaborative partnerships with public and private institutions in order to elevate agricultural production at the Crit Farms. Please join me in welcoming a Lower Basin person now, Josh Moore.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Josh Moore. I'm here to represent the 4,500-plus members of the Colorado River Indian tribes. I'm extremely honored to be on this table with this panel of experts in our field, and it always harkens me back to some wording that, some verbiage that my grandfather gave me as a kid, where he always said that if you're not at the table, then you're probably on the table. So I'm really honored that I could be here in this room and to share my story. I'm a consumer of innovation, I guess, as Vineetha mentioned, and at the Colorado River Indian tribes, we're a pretty unique place. We were established in 1862 by executive order. President Lincoln established a reservation for the peoples of the tributaries of the Colorado River. Ancestrally, the homelands of the Crit Reservation were the Mojave people, and throughout time, other tribes were added to the reservation, including the Chemehuevi, the Navajo, and the Hopi people throughout time. My ancestry, I'm Hopi, Mojave, and Chemehuevi, kind of a Heinz 57 of our reservation. I have some giants that are, shoulders of giants I stood on. My grandfather, my great-grandfather, opted to move to Parker from the Hopi reservation after World War II, after he served in the European theater. And the thing that, it's kind of a funny word because they called them the colonists. The Hopi colonists that came to the Crit Reservation came there for opportunity. And as a young person, and a young person who grew up on a reservation who's a tribal member, The first thing that I wanted to do when I graduated from high school was to leave. I saw the outside world as a place rife with opportunity, but as I went away to the university, I quickly realized that the one thing that I wanted to do was to go back and improve my community. And, throughout academia and young Indigenous people, that's a common theme. We leave our homes and we go to the outside world, and we quickly realize that there are things that we can take back to help improve our communities. And that's really what my role is at CRIT. This quote always kind of makes me laugh because my wife would say that I'm the forever optimist. I can always see the glass half full, but Will Rogers once said that the farmer has to be an optimist or he wouldn't still be a farmer. And let me tell you, this year really put this to the test. It's not always easy being a farmer. You kind of you plant for us we plant in the fall with hopes that the spring will be good, and then we hope that we'll get enough rain in the basin so that way we have irrigation water. It's kind of funny because farmers across the world pray for precipitation, and in the lower basin we pray that it rains in the upper basin. Snow as well. We are on an irrigation system that is managed by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. It's the Colorado River Irrigation Project. And we are able to control big portions of our irrigation through application of flood irrigation. Over 90% of the farm that I'm farming is flood irrigation. It's pretty dated, but at the same time there is a lot of benefit to flood irrigation, but as my role as the farm manager is to manage over 33,000 acres of CRIT's farmland, or a better way to put it is about 205,000 acre-feet of water. And I take that role very seriously. My tribal community and my tribal leaders entrust me to be a steward of the land and to use the resources wisely. And if I don't do that, I not only answer to a board, or I not only answer to the economy, but I answer to the 4,500 members of the tribe when I don't use those resources wisely. And if you've never had to present to a group of elders, let me tell you, they tell you when you're wrong. And I take that very seriously. This is an example of my job for the past 3 years. In 2022, CRIT Farms was approximately 8,500 acres in production. So that picture where you only see yellow and purple, that's what I was responsible for. Coming out of 2022 into 2023, I've taken on all the acreage in red. And looking into 2024, I'm adding all the acreage in blue to my purview at CRIT Farms. A lot of this farmland was developed by long-term developmental leases in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, and the irrigation infrastructure on this land spans all that time period. My job is to not only improve the land, but also to validate and find innovation in order to not only conserve water, but grow efficiently. Coming out of CRIT's contribution to the drought contingency plan in Arizona, a lot of the land that I was farming looked like this after 3 years of fallow. This specific farm right here was a piece of ground that we fallowed, and we let it rest for 3 years, and this is what I came back to in early this last year. And this is what I was able to turn it into in one season. I know that that picture is not the exact same angle, but I'm a sucker for sunsets, and we have some of the best. We're using a variety of different methods and technologies to try and increase our efficiency and improve our conservation. One of the projects that we've been participating with through a collaborative goodwill partnership with not only Central Arizona Project, but also an organization known as NDRIP, which I think they're out in the exhibit hall. This was some cotton that we grew in 2022. We grew about 600 acres utilizing this microgravity drip irrigation. This is just one example of some of the technology that we're helping to pilot. And one of the things that I've learned as, I guess, a user of innovation or a consumer is that not every pilot project works, And the biggest thing is to always learn a lesson from pilots that you do. And we've worked with NDRIP and with CAP and some of our other partners at the University of Arizona who are also partnering with this project on how to improve the use of this type of innovation. And this is just one of many. One of the exciting things about being here at CRWUA and having a place at this table is really the opportunity to learn from others. I always like to think that I stand on the shoulders of giants in the sense that Crit Farms was established 50 years ago, and in that time period, I'm just building upon what my forefathers have done. And you know, I have the opportunity to farm both in Palo Verde Irrigation District and on the reservation, and one of my favorite things to do is to talk to other farmers and learn what they're doing and get more information from them. You know, thinking about what can be done and what we're trying to do, I'd mention that about 90% of my ground is flood irrigation. I would say 70% of my ground is in alfalfa. We're not only looking at changing up our irrigation methods to include more efficient uses of irrigation, we're also changing up our crop patterns and looking to partner not only with academic institutions, but also with industry. CRIT is a participant in a Climate Smart Commodities grant with the University of Arizona and Bridgestone Tire. And this is a crop of waiuli that we we planted last October, and you can see there's a solid set sprinklers there where we're germinating. Unfortunately, we have a lot of issues with salinity, and this is one of the methods that we're utilizing to try to deal with salinity. Our reservation is a very beautiful place. You know, it's been carved out into all of these farms, but we're completely surrounded by a natural habitat that we constantly work to not only restore, but to protect as well. And it's always interesting where I would say that a lot of my contemporaries feel that agriculture is an organization or a group of people that doesn't care about the environment, but I know that's far from the truth. I know that I have a commitment not only to, to my children, but to my community as a whole, is that I care for the environment. And I've never met a farmer or rancher who doesn't also care for the environment. And we interact pretty closely, not only with, the people that call CRIT home, but also the river is not just a resource that we use. It's a part of who we are as people. And part of that is also caring for the environment and the ecology that calls our reservation home, whether that be plant or animal. And part of that is making sure to create an environment where all of life thrives. You know, it's really interesting. About 60% of our cropland is in alfalfa, and alfalfa always gets a terrible rap. I know there's a huge target on it, but I like to think that unless we're ready to give up ice cream, cheese pizza, and all the other things that I love, is that I'm not ready to give up alfalfa just yet. I'm not an apologist, but I am looking at ways to grow it more efficiently. And I think that there are a lot of people in this room that can probably help me along in that journey. One of my biggest challenges is that I'm farming in an irrigation project that is not only is it significantly aged, but it's also not managed by people who are actively growing. The Bureau of Indian Affairs manages CRIT's irrigation project. It delivers CRIT's water. And I know that canal breaks are something that everybody focuses, but we have an awful lot of them. And I've learned after farming in the Palo Verde Irrigation District and talking to my neighbors up and down the basin is just like Mike had mentioned, grower input and farmer and rancher input is so important. And I've learned that in irrigation districts where the farmers have a say-so in how the irrigation district is managed, there's a lot of efficiencies that can be done and improved, and there's less accidents. And that's something that myself and my tribal leaders have taken on, is to develop a framework where we can take not only input from, not necessarily me, but the other farmers that are farming the rest of CRIT's land to be able to improve that system. And grower input is just so important, and that's something that I know it's not exactly innovative, but at the same time, ditch bank conversations can solve a lot of problems, in my opinion. At the end of the day, we also grow cotton. And again, I'm a sucker for sunsets. Yeah, my goal is to produce high quality crop for the benefit of my people. And you know, the last thing at the end of the day I want to see is land that looks like this, that's just neglected, and infrastructure that's neglected. My goal is to not only improve the livelihoods of my people and the economy, but also to improve our land. And we're doing everything we can, and we're forging all the relationships and connections that we can to improve. And at the end of the day, the reason why I do it is for this, the next generation. We have a very rich heritage and a very rich culture at CRIT, and it's not an easy job, but I'm hoping that someday, you know, these children who are, you know, this was taken from our inaugural Water Rights Day celebration this year, we can continue to pass on our culture and heritage of being people of the Colorado River. And this is a picture from a fishing event that we just had this weekend, but the Colorado River is not just a resource for us. It's who we are. We've lived there for a very, very long time, and we're committed to you know, saving the Colorado River. And if that means innovating, we're going to do it. So with that being said, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Josh. So we've heard about optimism. We've heard about multi-generational farming. We've heard about technology. We've heard about looking at data, AI. Next speaker is all about tenacity. We have Tina Shields. She currently serves as Imperial Irrigation District's Water Department Manager, where she focuses on Colorado River resources, planning, water conservation, and management. She oversees IID's Colorado River supply entitlement with a focus on the implementation of water management policies and the coordination of various water conservation and transfer programs. Please join me in welcoming Tina Shields.
Hi, everyone, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak here and share a little bit about IID's challenges and the innovation that we have had to implement over the last 20 years. And as we look to ramp up, what I find interesting on this panel is, despite the differences between the upper basin and the lower basin, when you get agricultural folks together, we have a lot of commonalities and we have a lot of the same challenges. So there'll probably be some reiteration of some of the thoughts you've heard here from some of the other panelists. And tearing off of Mike's comments, he says he lives in the area with the richest summer country. Imperial Irrigation District is the richest spring and fall and summer and winter. Summer's a little hot, but we have a year-round growing season, and that allows us to put our water supply to beneficial use and grow crops and feed the nation along with our fellow cohorts here. I'm pressing the wrong button. So we have a little bit of water in IID. As of 2003, as a part of a settlement agreement, we agreed to limit our water use to 3.1 million acre feet. And that kind of freaks people out because it's a really big number. But if you come down to Imperial Valley in the summertime and you drive and you see the expansive agricultural region and you see the fields, and more importantly, if you come down now when it looks like a patchwork quilt with the beautiful produce that our growers grow, and not to take away from Yuma, but a lot of that lettuce comes from our region and goes through Yuma. It's really an amazing thing to see what you can do with land and what you can do with sunshine and what you can do with a little bit of water. So we have about 500,000 acres that we farm. We farm 365 days a year, a little slow on Christmas, but other than that, we really want to make the most of what natural resources we have in the area. Interestingly enough, though, we're a little bit farther downstream than the rest of some of these users, and we're quite a bit of distance from the Colorado River. So it is our sole water supply. We do not have access to groundwater. We do not have access to alternative supplies. And that water travels about 85 miles west off the Colorado River through a single All-American Canal channel to get to us. We're very lucky in that gravity works wonders, and it's hard to break in many cases, and our system is largely gravity flow. We have very few pumps or electrical needs, other than for the technology that we're seeing moving forward as we implement our large-scale conservation programs. So we have a significant irrigation and drainage system. We have about 3,000 miles of open channel gravity flow canals and drains. It's a system built 115 years ago with some enhancements more recently the last 20 years, but it's pretty basic. If you dig that channel and you follow elevation profiles, then you're going to get that water to where it needs to be, and that's on the fields and the farms that our growers maximize their production on. We dabble a little bit in energy. Imperial Irrigation District is also the 6th largest public power utility in California, and we're able to provide that resource, and we're seeing a lot more interlaps and overlaps these days as we see renewable resources emerging and as we see new technologies and opportunities at the Salton Sea, which I'll get to in a little bit. The pictures you see here show our All-American Canal as a part of our 2003 Quantification Settlement Agreement and some other conservation programs. There was state funding and San Diego County Water Authority funding to line 22 miles of that through the middle of the desert, and that's been a very significant conservation program in our portfolio of conservation programs. And as much as I would like to say that our core business is delivering water to the fields and taking water off these fields, when you have a very large water supply, in addition to the target on your back, you also have a lot of responsibility to find creative ways and mechanisms to share those supplies, particularly as you start to see limits placed. But what do? We grow food to feed the nation. We have a $2.6 billion agricultural economy, similar to what we've heard from my neighbor. We have about 70% forage crops in our service area, and I won't have to make the spiel about not eating pizza and ice cream, but I will tell you the growers respond to the markets, and if you eat it, they grow it, and if you don't want them to grow it, then you have to change your patterns and you have to change your habits, because a grower will not save water by not farming alfalfa. He will just grow something else. And I think that's the important thing to remember here is we cannot villainize ag, we cannot villainize our food supply unless we want to go on a really large diet. And I don't think that's going to happen as we see the buffets here in Las Vegas. But it's quite the phenomenon to see our community, which is largely built on ag, where 1 in every 6 jobs is directly related, and those other 5 jobs are touching that agricultural sector as well. So it's very crucial to our community. When we lose the Colorado River, we move. That's where we are in the system. We're at the very bottom, and we don't have alternative choices. So it is our responsibility to be efficient in our water use and to be stewards of that resource, and also to look beyond our service area boundaries to the river system to see how we can be helpful. So as much as I'd like to say, as I mentioned earlier, that we're just in the water delivery business, the last 20 plus years, we've dabbled in conservation, and we do conservation on a much larger scale. With the implementation of our Quantification Settlement Agreement water transfer program, which allows funding from urban areas to flow to our district and the water to flow towards the funding, we implement programs that conserve about 500,000 acre-feet a year. So on a scale perspective, those are very significant. It's about 16% of IID's water supply, and that is not fallowing, that is conservation, efficient conservation that's verified and requires, from an agricultural perspective, an improvement in the crop consumptive use in order to ensure that our community is made whole, that we continue to farm, but we just use less water to do so. So a little bit about our programs and our program history. This is the 20th year of our Quantification Settlement Conservation Program, but we actually started about a decade plus before that with the implementation of a partnership with the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. That was the first conservation on a large scale that IID entered into. Of course, our growers have always implemented their own projects using their own private funding to maximize their resources and their yields on their fields. But Metropolitan funded the large-scale implementation, basically a massive capital improvement program with IID. They came in and they lined over 200 miles of canals. They built 3 reservoirs. They upgraded 2 reservoirs. We built lateral interceptors to pick up water that would have gone into a drain and reroute that water to a reservoir where there were existing downstream demands, and that water could be used productively and more efficiently. We also really started looking at, despite having a gravity flow system, there are opportunities for automation. So we're big on doing things the old-fashioned way, but if you bring a little technology in, it turns out that there are quite a few opportunities, even as much as we see farming change as the generations start to change. We're seeing that in our irrigation district as well. Metropolitan also had us start innovating and piloting with the growers on some on-farm programs, and that has translated into an even larger program, which in 2003 is called, we call it the QSA, which recently celebrated its 20th year. It's enabled us to generate large volumes of water, but more importantly, in 2003, that was a series of programs and partnerships that allowed us to start to take our system efficiency, fixing our system, making it more efficient, and then go to the next step and the next level of conservation, which is working with our growers. So for the first time, we were able to implement large-scale on-farm conservation programs. They're all efficiency-based, and we provide funding to the growers, and then we let them work their magic, because the last thing you want to do is tell a grower how to grow his crop and how to run his business. So we provide the conservation funding. What we need to see from the growers is improvement in agricultural water use efficiency. We need to see something that we can touch, smell, feel. We need to be able to verify that there is an active conservation measure being implemented. We see a variety of tools that the growers use. Probably the most popular are the ones you're more familiar with, so drip irrigation, sprinkler systems, tailwater return systems. Laser land leveling is huge in Imperial Valley. If you can tilt those fields just a little bit more in one direction and slow that water down and get it to be a little bit more uniform application, then you're going to be able to use less water and still grow that same crop, or possibly even increase your yields. So that's been a very successful program for IID. It's one of the things that moving forward we intend to tier off of. I think some of you saw earlier this week, there was a California signing ceremony for some of these system conservation implementation agreements. Using the federal funding, we're very proud to have executed the first agreement. But last year, California stepped up and said, we're willing, through these voluntary compensated conservation programs, to increase our conservation efforts so that we can ensure that there isn't a Lake Mead or a Colorado River crisis while we're trying to develop the longer-term operational guidelines. That lower basin, what the California proposal turned into was a lower basin proposal that is going to generate 3 million acre-feet over the next 4 years and add that elevation to hopefully protect the system enough to get these new guidelines and rules in places. When we talk about challenges for IID, we have local challenges in addition to the regional river level challenges. And one of those challenges for IID is the Salton Sea. As we get more efficient and as our farmers have less discharge off their fields and surface water runoff, that's decreasing the inflow to the Salton Sea, which is the largest inland body of water. At its peak, it was over 320 square miles, so you think it's big until you drive by it, and then it's really big. And that's a saline body of water where our agricultural return flows go. So over the years, it gets a little bit saltier. There's really no other water sources other than the occasional monsoon storm. We get less than 3 inches of rain a year, so that's not a big driver from a water standpoint, but it's also a huge flyway on the bird flyway. And maybe not because it's the best environment for birds, but because of all the urban development and the loss of wetlands, the birds adapt and they go where the food is, and that's what the Salton Sea was. It was essentially a restaurant for the birds. We've lost that more recently because of the saline increase. So the Salton Sea now has 2 challenges. Previously, it was just getting saltier every year, but because of these water conservation activities and because of our efforts to step up and use less water, that has a direct impact on the Salton Sea, and that's a declining inflow, which then causes very large acreages of land to be exposed. So this is a graphic, and the different colors represent 5-year steps of where the Salton Sea will be going as a result of water conservation programs that total 500,000 acre-feet a year. We are going to end up with over 74,000 acres of playa that's exposed. And you can only imagine when it gets a little windy, what happens. The wind picks up that soil, it takes the deserts to the west, and that sand that's gritty, and it turns it into sandpaper and scours across these lands and creates the potential for large air quality emissions problems. So we have a very disadvantaged community. Despite the ag economy, it's a border community, and we have a lot of healthcare issues. One being access to healthcare, and the second just being sort of locational issues and not having the ability or the economics to seek proper treatment. We have very, very high childhood asthma rates, and we're in a PM10 noncompliance region to begin with, and part of that's related to the proximity to the border and the more stricter California regulations versus the less strict ones in Mexico. But it's really inherent upon our district to ensure that as a result of these water transfers, we can't let our community be negatively impacted. We have enough challenges in the region. And so we're really tasked with how do we ensure that these lands, and particularly those with the more emissive soil types, don't generate air quality problems, because we all live there. And much like the tribes have a lot of cultural ties to the land, our community is multi-generational. You said you're 5th generation, I'm 4th generation. My growers here are probably 4th and 5th generation. It's hard to leave, but when you do come back, it's because you care about the community and you care about that rural lifestyle that's so important to all ag communities up and down the basin. And so these are the types of challenges that you do a good thing, but then you're tasked with how do you address these more challenging issues.
Tina, I'm going to have to cut you off because we are way past, and I want to make sure we give Carlos his time.
Okay.
Sorry.
And I just slipped to the end here, which is just bragging a little bit about our total conservation programs, which over the last 20 years alone have generated about 7.7 million acre feet.
So thank you, Tina. I'm sorry I had to cut you off, but I do want to make sure we give Carlos enough time. We started with Mike, who gave us a really deep insight into Wyoming and the headwaters, and now we go all the way to Mexico. And we have Dr. Carlos de la Parra. He's a founding partner at the Luken Center for Strategies on Water and Environment, with over 30 years of studies and environmental work on the US-Mexico border. He has been a research professor at El Colegio de la Frontera Norte and regional federal officer in Baja California and representative at the Mexican Embassy in Washington for the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Carlos de la Parra.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vineetha. Truly an honor to be in this panel. I am, as of right now, relieving Tina Shields from claiming to be the furthest downstream user, as she usually does, and pointing to an additional small feature, an international boundary. And that international boundary, of course, creates different context. The three fundamental sectors that would play in what we're doing in the Colorado River would be government, agriculture, and environment. And I point you to what I call parallel universes. You see how government in the United States has a very decentralized format for decision-making, while Mexico is centralist. And that creates a bit of a distance when you're in the furthest part of the country away from Mexico City. Water is also very different in terms of property between Mexico and the United States. And in agriculture in the United States, it's always been an industry. It's efficiency-oriented. It's immersed in water markets. It is competition and efficiency, and I don't need to go on talking about this. You have seen all of the innovations and technology and AI applied and so on and so forth. You have to recognize that on the Mexican side, agriculture is the heir apparent to the agrarian reform, the revolution in the 1920s in Mexico. And that has always been the means for political control. Business has not been a central feature of agriculture in Mexico. Only recently you begin to have crops that that have gained notoriety worldwide, like the avocado and so forth. In fact, in terms of the environment, whereas in the United States in the 1970s, the environmental movement becomes a grassroots societal claim, a political struggle to defend natural resources. In Mexico, it really was a government initiative. And it was a government initiative because Mexico needed to be part of the global community. It has become, in many ways, even the laws have been written by large industry. And so the environmental movement, the agriculture sector, and government are really very different between the United States and Mexico. And we're only a few kilometers apart from where our IID is, but yet the context, the world is very different. Having said that, you must ask the question, so what does this have to do? What is the impact that this provides to what's happening in terms of water? And I think that you need to figure or think about a signal lag between what's happening in the world and what is occurring in the behavior of farmers in Mexico. You see there the sequence of signals coming from the International Boundary and Water Commission, the Mexican section, that is, of course, on a day-to-day basis in a dialogue with the International Boundary and Water Commission, the U.S. section. The National Water Commission on Mexico, CONAGUA, is the second step, and then furthest removed, of course, is the Irrigation District, which you see there as DR-014. Now, what I'm pointing to, the two graphs, is what I call a signal lag in the levels of water in Lake Mead declining and the area of alfalfa planted on the rise. Now, in an earlier panel today, Professor Frisbold from the University of Arizona was pointing to a blue water footprint, and notwithstanding what Professor Frisbold was saying, when you increase alfalfa in a irrigation district like Mexicali, what you're seeing is a concentration of power and a concentration of resources in the hands of a few, which suggests a further entrenchment of private interest for profit and not for the river itself. With that scenario, I'd like to tell you what civil society has been doing, and I'd like to, first of all, provide the courtesy and the credits. I shout out to CK Blue Shift and Bonneville Environmental Foundation, Business for Water Stewardship. These entities, we've engaged in a conversation over the course of the last 2 to 5 years, talking about how to work with an agricultural community that is juxtaposed to the Raise the River Coalition doing restoration of ecosystems in the Colorado River Delta. You also heard Jennifer Pitt earlier talk about Raise the River and what has been accomplished in Mexico regarding restoration. And we started talking with the agricultural community about a couple of years ago, began a GIS, Geographical Information Database, georeference database that would provide us with enough intel to begin workshops and talking about how to expand the capabilities of farmers in working their land and starting efficiencies about an order of magnitude less sophisticated than what we've been hearing in the past, but nevertheless starting to work in the same direction. Sitting right there in the front row is a colleague from Restauremos El Colorado, Carolina Sanchez, and you see her in the photo right there. She has been spearheading pilot projects involving something called silvopasture. Please don't ask me what that is. You can ask her when the panel is over. But the essence of it is to begin to offer a diversification of income for farmers so that they can begin to downscale the importance of using more water and upscaling the importance of a profit, a conservation ethic that would provide a greater resilience for Mexicali farmers in the context of climate change. In the process of doing this, at the Luken Center, we've started developing a demand curve for water. And so there's the demand curve right there, which tells us how much we would need to have in order for farmers to begin to downscale their use of water. And on the right, you see something that's called the Markov matrix, which predicts where water will be allocated towards in the future, given the current status of markets for water. I would point you to the two parallel lines that are right under the orange line. Those two lines, one of them is alfalfa and the other is fallowed land. And so what's happening, as you saw the increase in alfalfa crops, is that the alfalfa fields are growing at the same rate that other farmers are fallowing their land. The concentration of power in a few hands managing water and the reluctance to release water to additional activities, such as, for instance, water conservation or something called agrovoltaics, where you begin to combine agriculture with renewable energy. And we heard some of that from the Gila River Indian tribes. Those are some of the activities that I call the way forward. And so I will, I guess, stop right here and thank you for the invitation, Vineetha, and see if we have any additional input from the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Della Parra. This was just great listening to all the wisdom that have been accumulated over the years, over generations, and by practicing and participating in different events. But now is the time for questions, and I want to start with Mike, because we have entered the 24th year of drought in the Colorado River Basin. And I want to start with a question to Mike. What does drought mean to you?
So drought in our country looks a little different than it does downstream. We're near the mountain base, and drought can occur to us on a good year for everybody else. It's crazy. Last year, 2023, was the most snowfall that Utah's seen. It's the most snowfall that southern end of Wyoming had seen. At my place, 20 miles from 13,000 peaks where the Green River starts, it was just an average winter. Okay, we didn't get the snow. It was the oddest thing. It went south of us. So every year we could experience some form of drought. Now we don't experience it where it burns up everything. We always have some. And drought in our country means you may not be able to irrigate part of your place. That's what it means. We normally can irrigate some. And we pick and choose every year. We know what ground grows and what ground doesn't, and we judge that water every year. But drought for us could happen any year, even on a good year. It's just an odd, when you're in these small basins, what looks like the snow's hitting everybody may not hit you.
Thank you, Mike. And for Josh, is that the same experience that you have as well in the Indian tribes?
Yeah, I think that 2022 was a year where we really experienced the effects, and I wouldn't just say drought, overall climate change, in the sense that it's interesting because depending on who you talk to, everyone has a different opinion on what climate change is and what causes it. But in 2022 on our reservation, there wasn't a single farmer that would argue that it wasn't a windier, drier spring than we'd ever had before. By March, we'd had 4 historic wind events, and every farmer on our reservation was irrigating more frequently than they would at that point in time. We reached a point by May where we realized that we were on target to be over-diverted. So every farmer on our reservation had to make the hard decision to internally fallow ground. We had to deficit irrigate, and we all had to make sacrifice. And for us, I would equate drought with sacrifice. And there wasn't a single farmer who didn't have to make a sacrifice last year in one of the most explosive markets that we'd seen in a long time.
Thank you, Josh. And Carlos, does that resonate with you as well with regards to what's the definition of drought in Mexico?
That's a good question. It's not in the vocabulary. It's not in the vocabulary of the irrigation district. Drought has never been a reality in Mexicali. Why? Because irrigation districts throughout Mexico do suffer from drought. They do need to have an adjustment. But remember that the Colorado River Basin is part of a 1944 treaty that has always supplied the exact amount of water, and not only the exact amount of water, but it can be pre-scheduled on a monthly basis. And so climate change comes along. In fact, post Minute 319, when there was the first agreement that Mexico would cut back on usage if the need arose, it didn't happen. And so 4 years after Minute 319 had already started, there wasn't a project on the ground to begin to increase resiliency in Mexicali. The farmers in Mexicali have never had a reason to look up in the dictionary what drought means until today. And so we're learning, and that's why I spoke about what needs to be done as just a very, very recent approach to how to deal with drought.
Thank you, Carlos. Now, moving on to Tina, we heard you talk about QSA, we heard you talk about conservation and efficiency. I think there is a perception out there that these are the same things. Would you be able to elaborate for us what is the difference between perhaps efficiency and conservation?
Guess I don't need to push the button anymore. So I think the big difference involves the F word, following. So we have an active efficiency-based conservation program, which means we want to keep those fields in production because that keeps the community working and thriving, whereas a lot of folks may have conservation opportunities that are just reducing their water use, cutting the supplies, deficit irrigation, a little pseudo irrigation. You can kind of blend it in there. But for us, it was really important as a district to ensure that we would increase our efficiency levels to, again, help take that target off our back and waste allegations. And I think we had a very successful program that's been running about 10 years now that has allowed our on-farm conservation alone to generate over 1.1 million acre feet of water. We're averaging about 170 to 200,000 acre feet a year. And we're trying to step that up with our new conservation programs, working with Reclamation and their new agreements to increase our conservation to 24% of our water supply. So we're probably going to have to blend a little bit deficit irrigation in there and pilot that out, see how that affects our fields, see how that affects our crop yields. We also have salinity issues in Imperial Valley, the same that Mexico has to deal with when you're at the end of the river system, and we need to make sure that we don't sacrifice our fields and their productivity as we conserve water and we get sufficient leaching programs and availability.
Thank you, Tina. And to Dr. Cabot, from an academic perspective, what do you see as a difference between efficiency and conservation?
Well, I appreciate being asked this question. I'm on the board of our Education Colorado Foundation, and we're actually writing a citizen's guide to this topic, and I'm kind of a pain to them because I keep reminding them that there's a difference between these things. I think it just boils down to how you understand the reason why you're taking less diversion off of your water rights. So our irrigation systems are efficient, and so what that results in is essentially saved water in the system that is not remunerable back to the farmer because presumably consumptive use rates would stay the same. You'd satisfy benefits, of course, from water quality and other things like that by not having to run the system through the soil. Conservation is the result of not diverting because your demand is lower, so you're consuming less water. It could be the same physical amount of water, but the reason why you do that foregone diversion is totally different. And those both inform two different kinds of programs that we could. Right now we're engaged in conservation programs because it's an urgent crisis. We have we're trying to reduce consumptive use, at least temporarily, and just speaking for the on behalf of the durability of agriculture and continued improvement of. We've just had a bipartisan infrastructure bill that we spent billions of dollars on, and I would argue that agriculture is part of the food production infrastructure of this country. And so I would like to see investment in irrigation infrastructure, and I'm pleased to see that so many of the other districts around the country and around the basin are doing that.
Thank you, Dr. Cabot. And my next question is for Julie, following up on that. It is important to maintain a robust agricultural economy, and you have really spent a lot of time working towards that. In your opinion, how do you maintain a robust agricultural economy in times of duress such as this?
I think it's collaboration, education, and stakeholder engagement. As I spoke about before, when we democratize data, that allows us to empower and inform the public and consumers of just how important water use for agriculture and irrigated agriculture is. I think domestic wells certainly have the votes by people, but if we look at the impact of irrigated agriculture and how we feed the U.S. and simultaneously the world, I think that's crucial. That is a crucial topic, and I think that's how we get there, is by raising awareness to the consumers so that they understand the value of a circular economy and driving back value to our rural communities who feed us, clothe us, and nurture us.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Julie. And Mike, do you feel the same way? Do you have a different opinion on maintaining a robust agricultural economy?
Yeah, I think I like to say this to kids. I also serve, one of these guys said they serve with their FFA committee. I interviewed some kids for office the other day in the FFA, and they were all apologetic to being in agriculture. They're like, well, I know it's just agriculture, or it's just this. And I say, no, you have to tell people, because if you don't, that you're proud to raise food for the world, because that's what we do, is raise food for the world each and every day. And if that goes away, the communities fall very quickly, very quickly. The only thing more important than food is water, and they're about a 2-week lag time between one and the other. So if we don't keep that food thing going in agriculture, and I applaud everybody in here that's in agriculture, because you are keeping this world moving. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mike. And I saw Josh nodding his head. Would you like to add on to that?
Yeah, my thought is that it's not, if a farmer goes out of business, it's not as if he can just reopen the business in the next community. Agriculture is hard to get into. It's multi-generational for a reason, as wealth is passed down from one generation through the next, not only materially, but also knowledge. It's not as if you can just create farms out of nothing. And it's really important that rural economies and agricultural economies stay strong in the sense that they're not easily replaceable. And my thought is I would like to eat locally grown food rather than food imported from the other side of the world.
Tina, would you like to add on to that?
Well, and I think it's important to maintain the productivity of the ground. We have to keep the farmers in business. You're 100% right. You can't put somebody out of business in farming and next year say, oops, sorry, we screwed that up. It's too late. But we have to maintain the common goals that I hear all the time. It drives me nuts. 80% of the water is used by ag, but who eats that food? And we're really polarizing agriculture, and I think that to the extent that we can start to realize that those uses are community uses, they're environmental uses. Ag is not a single sector, it's all of the sectors put together, that it's just critical.
I just want to add, if I may, We heard about regenerative agriculture, and I think that that points to a model. And I think that what I'm seeing in Mexicali compared to other places is a model that is outdated, an industrial agricultural model that needs to evolve. And I think that part of what we're hearing in terms of pointing the finger towards the usage of water in agriculture is, of course, unfair, but also it points to the need for a different model. And I would really encourage any cross-border dialogue that begins to push in the right direction, models in the Imperial Irrigation District, in Mexicali and other places. I think there's a richness there that we are about to discover.
And that's a great point, Carlos. And I want to raise this question to Julie and Perry, both of you. What do you see as the barriers to perhaps sharing such information? What do you see as the barriers to perhaps implementing newer models, newer methods?
I think we're seeing kind of a revolution of demand on agriculture, ones we've never seen before, where we just look at it for food. But as the bio-based economy initiative increases, and we're seeing the federal government spend billions of dollars on sustainable aviation fuel, bio-based products as a whole, we can't have that initiative without agriculture. And so it is our time. I am the most optimistic about agriculture now because it is our time to tell our story. As the world looks to a more regenerative and resilient approach, the foundation of that is ag. And so everyone in the room who's participating in agriculture truly has the opportunity right now to revolutionize the way we've always talked about it.
Yeah, I suppose I'll just add to that. And I think that there's such an abundance of information that that's why I'm excited. And you notice I use the phrase supervised artificial intelligence, because with that abundance of information comes an overwhelming, there's just the decision making that has to go with that is so daunting. And so I think that's an important point to remember, that we need to reserve a place for folks that have that inherent knowledge from the work that they've done from generation to generation. So I'm kind of excited to see where this all ends up, where we benefit from some of these tools and able to sift the information together, but that always gets filtered through an intuition. And I think that farming is a very intuitive activity on a lot of different levels. And so, if we can make use of all this stuff at the same time, make sure it still stays in the lane where, we have historic benefit of folks that have done it. I'm excited to see where that ends up. So rather than just farming by ChatGPT, which I don't think is going to work very well.
Thank you. So we are at 4:35. We are 5 minutes past our time. But if you're interested, I would like to ask one more question. Is that okay? Okay, great. Perfect. I want to know, because, and Tina can resonate to this, but we have had a lot of media attention on agriculture these days. How do you think, in your opinion, let's start with Tina, how do you think media can help basically make the points that you all have made here? It is important that we sustain a robust agricultural economy. What kind of pointers would you like to maybe tell media?
So media could help by reporting the facts and not skewing to the story they're trying to tell.
Yes.
Thank you. Would you like to add on to that? Anybody?
One of the things that I'd like to add is that all farms and ranches are, whether they, no matter who owns them, they all impact families. I think that it's often generalized that farming is this faceless industry that rapes the earth and takes away from future generations. Even though that I am a enterprise of the Colorado River Indian tribes, I'm still a family-owned and operated farm. It's just that my family's 4,512 members of my family. And I would argue that every farming operation in America and throughout the world is also a family operation. We're not some faceless enterprise. What we do is to care for the land so that way the next generation has the opportunity to do what we're doing today.
Thank you, Josh. And I think with that, please Give it up for our panel. It was amazing to hear all of this. And do come up and speak to everyone.